storefronts, and window displays. Now these are the life of any building that you draw. And in this video, I'm going to show you the process I use to draw them every single time. It's only 3 steps. Well, maybe 3.5, but you're going to see why that is. After this video, you're going to be drawing these window displays like the future artist you are. Now, before I go into the technique, I have a little surprise for you, but you're going to have to stick around to the end to see what that is. The first step is to define your values. Now, I bet you're saying, Karan, what does that even mean? Well, I'm glad you asked. Defining your value is simply laying your colors down into basic shapes. Now, you're not going to worry about detail here. You're just going to be loosely applying the colors. I'm using markers in this video, but you can easily also do this with watercolors. Here's what that looks like. In this step, you're creating the emotion of your sketch. I'm using the light gray here to lay the groundwork for the structures. This includes the table, the pipes hanging from the ceiling, and even the walls. My go-to technique is to use dots and dashes. You don't want to be too defined. You just want to give the impression of the space. Now that the basic building structure is done, I'll move on to adding the plants. What's great about urban sketching is that you have complete creative control. You can draw the plants anywhere. You're going after emotion here. Just remember, dots and dashes. That's all you have to do. The bushes outside are all just dots, and the plants inside are all just dashes. The larger bush here is the only one I'll lay down a thicker bit of color. And the flowers will simply be specks of red and some yellow. Now I'm really laying down some colors to define some of the elements inside the window. You can already see how the outside and the inside are being treated differently. I'm adding more layers of color on the outside, adding some shadows to really show a separation of space. This adds atmospheric perspective. That's just a fancy way of saying elements closer to you are clearer and more defined than elements further away. In this case, what's behind the glass is further away than what's in front of it. But I will still add some depth to the plants inside. And finally, I'll add some black to the plant pots outside to really separate them from what's happening inside. The second step is to add your details. Now here's where you're going to use your pen or your fine liner to really define those shapes you just laid down with your colors. And just like before, all you're going to do here are dots and dashes. That's all. Remember, we're going after the impressions of an element. You don't need to fully draw them. I like moving my pen very quickly because it doesn't give me enough time to really think about what I'm doing. If I had time to think, my design training would kick in and I'd try to draw straight lines. That's why I love dots and dashes. I can define the shapes without being rigid. I can remain loose, and loose sketches have way more character. The colors I laid down before are the guides for where my pen will go. I'm just following each marker and adding a dot here and a dash there. And the last thing I'll do in this step is use my pen to separate the space between the inside and the outside. Now remember how I said this may be 3.5 steps instead of 3? That's because I have to bring back my marker to color over the glass to further separate it from the outside. I like to apply the markers a little thicker around the edges of the window to add a vignette. This keeps the colors bright in the center and separates the space around the edge. Your third and final step is to add contrast, and you'll do that by adding your highlights and your shadows. Some people use colored pencils here, and those work brilliantly, but my tool of choice is a white acrylic marker. Acrylic markers work best after your colors have dried. If your paint or markers are still wet, the acrylics will just get absorbed into the page, so take your time here. And just like every other step, it's all about dots and dashes. It's very easy to overdo the whites, so use the acrylic sparingly. It's the same when adding darker colors for your shadows. Just use small dabs of color. The last thing you want is for your shadows to really dominate your composition. Before you click off, do you remember that surprise I was talking about earlier in the video? Well, go to the video description and you'll see a link to download the exact outline I used to make this video. Download it, print it, load it on a tablet, then start this video over to follow along with me. And just to recap, the 3 steps to perfect window displays is 1, define your values. Then 2, add your details. And finally 3, add some contrast. That's it, super simple.